Hi guys, welcome to Dimitra's Dishes. So today I'm going to teach you how to make Domatokeftedes, which are basically Santorini style tomato fritters. Let's go over the ingredients and then we're going to get started. So we need some tomatoes, of course, the freshest tomatoes that you can get. If you have homegrown, definitely use those. We need some basil, actually a combination of herbs, whatever your favorite herbs are. I'm using basil, some fresh mint, and parsley. I have some feta cheese here, some flour, salt, pepper, oregano, baking powder, spring onions or green onions, and half of an onion here. So I'm using half of an onion. If you have a small onion, go ahead and use that. Red, white, Spanish, it really doesn't matter, whatever onion you have. Scallions are definitely a must. So I've had a lot of requests to make this recipe, and I was recipe testing the other day and they came out so delicious I had to hurry up and share this recipe with you. These taste like the summertime in Greece in a little fritter. They're so delicious. As a matter of fact, anytime I go to Greece in the summer, I've never had tomatoes like the ones in summer other than the ones that we grow in our backyard. I cannot eat a supermarket tomato for like months after we come back. The freshness, they're just homegrown. They're never put in the refrigerator over there. And putting tomatoes in the refrigerator kind of ruined the flavor. Anyway, I'm gonna finally chop my onion and then we're gonna move on to the next step. So I put my onion in my bowl. Next, I'm gonna slice up my scallions. I'm just gonna finely slice them all the way down to the white tip. I know in a previous video, I didn't use the white tips because it didn't really go in that recipe. And I got some comments, people mortified that I threw it in the compost bin. So today, in this recipe, we're gonna use all the parts of the scallion, including the tip, the white parts. Next, we're gonna chop up our herbs. So I'm just gonna get all the leaves off this basil. And basils this time of year just smell delicious. And tomato and basil just go so well together. But you can go ahead and use whatever herbs you have or you like. Dill goes really nice in this, so you can use that. If you had some fresh thyme, you could use that instead of the oregano. It's completely up to you, but this combination is one of my favorites. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and chop up my parsley and my mint, and then we're gonna move on to cutting our tomatoes. All right, so I'm gonna add my herbs to my onion mixture. So now we're gonna cut up our tomatoes. I have 1.5 pounds of Roma tomatoes. They're really nice and ripe and they smell really fresh and nice. So we're just gonna cut these up. We're gonna dice them really, really small. And I like dicing tomatoes with a serrated knife. I feel like it makes it so much easier. Just like that. And as we're doing this, we're just going to keep putting these into our bowl and we're almost done. So we have our tomatoes and our herbs and onions in there. Now we're just going to add some baking powder to our flour mixture. And we're going to also season it with a little bit of salt and pepper. Just give it a nice mix. So we're just going to add our flour to the tomatoes, heaping 1 or 2 teaspoons of dried oregano. Mix it all up, and then once this is all mixed, you can just fry these up just as is, but I added a little twist because I feel like feta just goes wonderful in these. It makes them so delicious. It actually makes them taste like little fried pizzas, which is kind of like what my nephew calls them. So I'm just gonna, right after I mix this all up, I'm also gonna crumble up the feta cheese, and then they're gonna be ready to fry. So we're just crumbling the feta cheese. Technically I would put much more than this, but this is all I have in my house right now. Use the best quality feta that you can find. My favorite brand, I know I get a lot of questions about brands. My favorite brand is the Donis feta, and it's a sheep's milk feta. It's really creamy and nice. But get whatever kind of feta that you can find that's really high quality. Make sure don't buy the already crumbled kind because that's not good at all. Just takes a second to crumble it yourself. We're gonna mix this all up, and then I'm just gonna taste it and see if it needs a little bit more salt and pepper, and then we're gonna head over to the stove and start frying these. So I have in my frying pan, I have it heating over medium-high heat. I have some olive oil in here, and then I also have a plate lined with paper towels, so that way we can put the fritters in there when they're ready and they could absorb the oil. The best way to check to see if your oil is ready, you could put a wooden skewer or the back of a wooden spatula, and as soon as the bubbles start rising on top like that, that's how you know it's ready. I also lined some aluminum foil all over my stove top because I just can't stand oil splatter. These are totally worth making because they're so delicious. We're going to take about a tablespoon of the mixture and put it in our oil. Now you can make these a little bit smaller if you wanted to, but for me this is the perfect size. And you don't want to mess with them at least for 2 or 3 minutes until they release from the pan by themselves, because if you start to try to flip them around before they start cooking and they're set, they're just going to fall apart in the oil. So once they fry for about 2 to 3 minutes, they're going to firm up a bit and they'll be much easier to flip over. If you try to do it earlier, they're going to begin to fall apart. And it is easier to use 2 of these little spoons to flip it over rather than just 1. There we go. So our Domatokeftedes are all ready, but before we go into them and take a bite, which I really can't wait to do, I'm just going to give you a few tips on making these. So depending on the tomatoes that you're going to use, some tomatoes are a little juicier than others and they're going to release more juices than others. And some are a little drier. So the Roma tomatoes are not as juicy as maybe like a garden tomato would be if you're not growing Roma tomatoes in the garden. So the garden tomato will be a little more juicy and release more juice, and then it'll make the batter like immediately start to come together. If your tomatoes are a little bit on the drier side, just let the mixture sit in your bowl, either on the countertop for an hour or 30 minutes, or you can make it in the morning and just, you know, fry these up in the evening if you're doing that for a party. The longer they sit, the flavors are going to release and kind of marry and make more of like a little bit of a thinner batter that's going to be easier to scoop out and stick together. If they're a little bit more watery and release more juice, do not add more flour. Adding a lot of flour will ruin this. It'll kind of mess up the flavor. You want to be able to taste the tomatoes and the herbs and the onions. It's just what makes this fritter so delicious. Let me show you what it looks like, and also I want to let you know that these taste absolutely delicious with tzatziki sauce. I have the recipe up. I'll post links down below, but definitely serve it with a nice tzatziki sauce. Look at them. They're golden, they've stayed together, they're so crisp and light, which is exactly what you want them to be. They taste delicious with or without feta, so if you're keeping these vegan, obviously leave out the tzatziki if you have to, and leave out the feta. But if you like feta and you're like me, you're going to want to put the feta in there. You could also add some kefalograviera or Parmesan cheese. I would either add little bits of Gouda if you want to take it up a notch. I feel like cheese makes everything taste better. But we're going to bite into these right now. Especially with some tzatziki. Tzatziki just makes everything taste a million times better. You guys are going to want to make these. My nephew said it best. They taste like little mini fried pizzas. The scallion and the onion give it sweetness and freshness. All the herbs just come together beautifully. Basil and oregano are like a match made in heaven with tomatoes. The recipe will be in the description box down below, as well as on the website, www.dimitrasdishes.com. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Hit that like button if you liked the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.